Well, just as some of us predicted, despite the glazing that the mainstream media did for Marvel over the Thunderbolts, which was then subsequently renamed to the New Avengers after the first weekend of release, despite the fact that they tried to spin the opening box office weekend numbers that were absolutely miserable to try to make it look like it was going to be a success, a new hit for Marvel, the best Marvel movie since the last Marvel movie. Here we are, like clockwork, a month and a half later, and all of the same places that were heralding it as a massive success are now sitting there and saying the exact opposite. They're now forced to admit the truth, that it's a massive disappointment and that it lost money for Marvel. Thunderbolts lost millions of dollars despite great reviews. Where does Marvel go next? And it is so predictable that, in fact, here I was, 5 weeks ago, saying exactly what was going to happen in the mainstream media and what happens with so many of these Marvel movies that come out. Now, I clipped this out. This says 3 weeks ago. I made this video 2 weeks ago to make a point about what was going to happen, what we were going to see the media do. Because what do we see them do when a Marvel movie comes out? They tell you it's the best thing ever. They tell you it's going to be a massive success. It gets awful box office weekend numbers in its opening weekend. And then they try to tell you that that's good somehow. Predictably, we go down the line and it's the same thing over and over again. Oh, well, actually, what happened with this movie? How did this become a disaster? Here's what I said 5, almost 6 weeks ago. And then when the box office receipts actually come in and they're lower than you would expect, what does the mainstream access media do? They tell you that it's fantastic. They tell you that it's amazing. Just like we saw a few months ago with Captain America, Brave New World, with Black Captain America, so stunning and brave. It blew up at the box office. Well, what are we seeing from Thunderbolts? Thunderbolts assembles a mighty start at the box office. Except it doesn't. All these people do is lie and cover for Marvel until a few weeks later when it's obvious that the thing's going to flop, when it's obvious it's not going to make money, and they change the headlines and they say, what happened with the Thunderbolts? What happened with Brave New World? And that's the reality when it comes to Thunderbolts. And so, of course, here we are those few weeks later, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Thunderbolt's disappointing box office marks the end of an era for Marvel Studios. The 10 biggest reason Thunderbolt's box office is so disappointing. And a big write-up from Variety saying exactly the same thing. Days after Thunderbolts hit the big screen, Disney CEO Bob Iger was feeling celebratory. He publicly touted the comic book adventure as the first and best example of Marvel's new movie strategy, referring to the film's positive reception from audiences and critics. And what a relief, following a bumpy few years and a string of poorly reviewed misfires in the franchises. Well, once again, doesn't really matter what the critics think. And when you're just looking at verified audience reviews for people that are still excited and still want to give the MCU a chance, you're going to see what you want to see. However, the reality was plain as day that these characters weren't enticing people to come to the box office. And although I do think Thunderbolts is better than, say, Captain America Brave New World, I still thought it was a bad movie overall. And now here we are. 6 weeks later, Thunderbolts has cratered at the box office with $371 million globally. It's one of the lowest grossing installments in all of Disney's Marvel Cinematic Universe. If this is the second coming of Marvel, the superhero empire might need another reboot. And when they say it's one of the lowest grossing, it is the second lowest grossing in history. Here are all the MCU movies that have come out. We're going to scroll all the way to the bottom here. The bottom, obviously the Marvels, complete and total joke. A massive flop and a massive failure, embarrassingly so. But what's the second lowest grossing? The Incredible Hulk. Now, The Incredible Hulk, 2008. If you factor in inflation, that $265 million is actually up around and slightly above potentially $400 million. Higher than the Thunderbolts will finish. Captain America, the First Avenger, released in 2011. $370 million. With inflation factored in, obviously that's up near the $500 million range. Thunderbolts, $376 as of right now. Now that'll probably creep up above Black Widow when it's all said and done, but it's not getting to $390, right? It's not getting to Eternals at $400 million. And remember, Black Widow was released a couple years ago on the same day on Disney+. So when you factor in all these things, when you factor in inflation, when you factor in the ticket sales, the reality of this stuff, Thunderbolts is the second lowest performing MCU movie of all time. Marvel's calculus has changed, says Sean Robbins, Fandango's movie analytics director. We're in a new era where not every Marvel movie is going to hit $1 billion. And even before, not every Marvel movie hit $1 billion. We know that. That's a little bit of an exaggeration. But there was a point in time where it didn't have to be an Avengers movie. It didn't have to be a massive everybody come together special thing movie to hit $1 billion. And even if it doesn't hit $1 billion, you could still have these massively successful movies featuring characters that maybe weren't your top tier talent because people were invested and believed in the MCU. And now they're going to make a variety of excuses. Well, it's oversaturated. The superhero market's oversaturated. They've put out too much stuff. They put out too many interconnected movies, blah, blah, blah. I do think all of these things play a factor. But the biggest factor into why this is happening and why people have lost trust in Marvel is quite simply the fact that they've lost trust in Marvel. They no longer give them the benefit of the doubt. It used to be when you had a string of 5-6 movies that, some were awesome and some people just in general really liked, they were more than willing to go out there with something that had MCU slapped on it. Maybe it's a new character, maybe it's a couple characters that they're not your favorites, but you're going to go and stay invested because you care about this story and you have faith that Marvel's going to deliver a good product. That does not happen anymore. And now we're in an era where they struggle to crack 500 million. Pre-pandemic, 19 of the first 22 films at least cracked $500 million globally. If you factor in inflation, probably even more than that. Since then, the once Teflon brand has struggled with commercial consistency. Starting in 2020, just 6 out of 13 films have reached the $500 million benchmark. And obviously, we know some of those. Spider-Man No Way Home, massive success. Deadpool and Wolverine, massive success. But even some of those weren't successful. Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness made a little over $900 million at the box office. Unfortunately, that movie cost almost $400 million in a production budget and $150 million in marketing. They didn't make money on that. Thor Love and Thunder, massive budget, massive marketing budget, likely did not make money on that. So even your ones that are hitting over 500 million, because of the ridiculous expense associated with them, even some of those aren't financially successful. So how many of these postmortems do we have to see for Marvel to understand what the fucking problem is? And the fact that the mainstream media will lie and lie and lie to you all the way through, like weeks leading up to its release, even after the release, to try to spin these numbers, which anyone can look at and, do the math for yourself, do the research for yourself, and realize that's not going to be enough to be successful. And then a couple weeks down the road, they change their tune and they act like they're shocked. Where do we go from here? How did this happen? Why did this happen? Blah, blah, blah. We know. The fans know. That's why they're not showing up. The question is, I guess, will they show up for something like Fantastic Four? The next thing that Marvel has to worry about. The next thing that you're going to see the mainstream media spin up and hype, regardless of if it's actually a good opening weekend box office, regardless if it's actually a good movie or not, you're going to see them spin it up. You're going to see them hype it. And we'll have to wait to see what those box office results actually are before we actually know if what they're saying, that it's a success, if that shit is actually true. Because far too often, the media has lied to you over and over. What do you guys think about this? Let me know in the comments section below. Thunderbolts, not a success, a financial failure, a flop, one that lost money for Marvel. Who could have possibly predicted? I guess not the mainstream media. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I'll talk to you later.